Somebody in that control room said 4 words, and then the screen went to static. That is the entire incident, stripped down to its bones. No dramatic music, no slow build-up, just a command given in a shaking voice and a feed that never came back on. If you want to understand why grown men who had spent their careers in freezing black water suddenly wanted nothing more to do with a discovery they had chased for years, you have to start with the lake itself, because Lake Tahoe does not behave like the postcards suggest, and what happened on that boat in the early 1990s only makes sense once you understand what kind of water these people were actually working in. Tahoe sits more than 6,000 feet above sea level, wedged into the border between California and Nevada, and from the shore it looks like something out of a tourism brochure. The water is startlingly clear, the mountains fold down into it in perfect reflection, and on a still morning the whole basin looks frozen in place. That surface is real. It is also almost meaningless, because it tells you nothing about what is underneath it. At its deepest point, Tahoe plunges over 1,600 feet, deep enough that 4 football fields stacked end to end would still not reach the bottom. Sunlight gives out long before the floor. Temperature collapses toward freezing. And the silence down there is not simply an absence of sound, it is something divers describe as a physical presence, a weight that sits on the chest the deeper you go. What makes Tahoe unusual, and what makes this story possible at all, is that it is what hydrologists call a terminal lake. Water pours in from dozens of streams, but almost nothing drains back out. Whatever goes into Tahoe tends to stay in Tahoe. Combine that with near-freezing temperatures and almost no oxygen at depth, and you get a preservation chamber rather than an ordinary lake bed. Wood does not rot the way it should. Metal does not corrode at a normal rate. Even fabric has been recovered intact after decades underwater. Tahoe does not destroy what falls into it. It archives it, holding objects in something close to the exact condition they were in the moment they disappeared. That single property is why an entire steamship could go missing for 50 years and still be sitting down there, waiting. The vessel in question was the SS Tahoe, a real ship that once ruled this stretch of water. Nearly 190 feet long, fast for her era, and considered the finest way to cross the lake. She carried passengers and freight in a period when there was no road system worth the name circling the shoreline. People dressed for the occasion to ride her. She was not simply transportation. She was something the region built its identity around, a floating symbol of a lake that had not yet been paved in on every side. Then the highways came. Automobiles replaced steamers up and down the west coast during the 1930s, and the SS Tahoe went from essential to obsolete in the span of a single decade. By 1940, keeping her running cost more than anyone was willing to spend on a ship nobody needed to cross the water anymore. So her owners made the decision that shipping companies of that era often made with vessels they no longer wanted. They sank her deliberately, in deep water, off Glenbrook on the Nevada side, and let the lake take her out of sight for good. That was supposed to be a quiet, dignified end. Instead it became one of the enduring mysteries of the Sierra Nevada, because nobody had recorded exact coordinates worth trusting, and the deep basin does not give up a wreck's location easily. For decades, rumors circulated about where she had actually settled. Some believed she had broken apart on the way down and lay scattered across the floor in pieces. Others insisted she had gone down upright and whole, sitting in the dark exactly as she had been the day she sailed, waiting for someone patient enough or well-funded enough to find her. Every failed search only added to the legend. A ship you can document is history. A ship you cannot find becomes something closer to folklore. Underwater explorer Chris Nicholson, a technical diver known for methodical, well-documented wreck searches on cold, difficult water, took on the challenge of finally locating her in the early 1990s, working with a small team equipped with side-scan sonar and a remotely operated vehicle capable of reaching depths ordinary scuba divers cannot survive. They chose late winter deliberately. Cold months bring less sediment into suspension, and less sediment means clearer water, which meant this was the one narrow seasonal window where a camera lowered into the depths of Tahoe had any real chance of showing something useful. The trade-off was brutal cold, hour after hour on open water with equipment icing over and hands going numb on the controls, but that was the price of visibility, and everyone on that boat understood the exchange going in. A search like this is far less cinematic than people imagine. It is mostly sonar operators staring at faint returns on a screen, distinguishing boulders from debris from the sediment folds that make up most of any lake floor, and slowly building a mental map of what is actually down there worth investigating. Nicholson's crew spent the early hours of that expedition chasing contacts that led nowhere, the ordinary rhythm of hope followed by disappointment that defines almost every deep search. Then the sonar returned something stronger than the rest, a shape with real dimension, and the ROV was sent down to have a look. What came up out of the dark surprised everyone on board, but not in the way they expected. It was a boat, but not the one they were looking for. An entire vessel, previously uncharted and unrecorded, sitting quietly on the lake floor with no history attached to it in any log or record anyone could find. It raised an uncomfortable question that stayed with the crew for the rest of the dive. If a boat that size could vanish under Tahoe without a single mention in any official record, what else might the lake be hiding that nobody had ever thought to look for? Hours later, a second and far stronger sonar return appeared, and this time the dimensions matched the missing steamship almost exactly. The ROV was redirected. The tether fed out foot by foot into water that had not seen daylight in half a century, and the small control room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when everyone senses something real is about to surface. For minutes there was nothing on the monitor but drifting sediment, tiny pale flecks suspended in the lights like snow falling in slow motion through total darkness. Then, piece by piece, an unmistakable shape began to resolve out of the black. A bow. A railing. Long unbroken sections of hull far too deliberate to be anything but a ship. They had found her. And by every account from people connected to the expedition, the preservation was remarkable. Windows were reportedly still in place. Deck structures still stood upright. The ship sat exactly as she had been lowered into the water in 1940, as though she had gone down the previous week rather than 50 years earlier. It was everything the cold, dark, oxygen-starved conditions of Tahoe were known to produce, and everything the team had hoped to document when they set out that March. For a stretch of minutes, the dive went exactly the way a successful expedition is supposed to go. The ROV moved carefully along the hull, operators calling out features as the camera passed them, the survey settling into the kind of careful, professional rhythm you would expect from a team that had done this work before. This was supposed to be the story. A famous ghost ship, found at last, more intact than anyone dared hope, finally brought back into the public record after 50 years of failed attempts by other crews. Nobody in that room had any reason yet to feel anything but the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. Then the camera drifted slightly past the visible edge of the wreck, and according to people who have spoken about that day, someone noticed something that did not belong there. At first it read as ordinary debris, a pale shape resting near the sediment, the kind of thing any wreck accumulates after decades on a lake floor. But the longer the lights held on it, the less that explanation seemed to fit. The shape was too symmetrical, too smooth, arranged in a way that debris fields never are. Then a second shape appeared behind the first. Then a third, positioned in relation to the others in a way that read as deliberate rather than random. This is where the documented history of the expedition and the version passed down by word of mouth begin to separate. The recovery and identification of the SS Tahoe herself is well established and not seriously disputed. What allegedly happened in the minutes after the camera drifted past her hull comes almost entirely from an account attributed to someone who says he was working a station in that control room, a claim that has never been independently verified or attached to a name that can be checked. That distinction matters, and it is worth stating plainly rather than glossing over, because it is the difference between a documented discovery and a story that has simply been repeated long enough to feel solid. According to that account, one of the operators said quietly that what they were looking at might be human remains, and the room's mood shifted instantly from professional focus to something closer to dread. Voices reportedly began overlapping, some pushing for a closer look to properly document whatever this was, others already asking to pull back. Then, in the confusion, someone gave the order to cut the feed, and the recording ended. Whether a switch was thrown deliberately or a line was pulled by accident in the chaos has never been settled, even in the retelling. What is consistent across every version of the story is the aftermath, A crew that had spent days fighting brutal cold to find this ship suddenly wanting nothing more than to leave the water and never discuss what they had seen. There is a reason that detail carries weight even without verification. The same conditions that preserved the SS Tahoe so completely, the cold hovering near freezing, the total absence of light, the near-total lack of oxygen at depth, would have preserved almost anything else that sank into that same stretch of water. A body would not decompose down there the way it would in a warmer, shallower lake. It would hold its shape far longer than most people assume is possible, which is precisely what accounts describe seeing. Not scattered bones but something that still resembled what it had been the day it went under. That is a difference that separates an unsettling story from one that actually lingers, and it is worth being honest that this detail cannot be confirmed independently, only weighed against what is scientifically known about how Tahoe's water behaves. None of this exists in isolation from the older stories locals have told for generations, particularly from the casino era of the 1950s and 1960s, when rumors persisted about people who disappeared into deep water and were never meant to be found again. Most of that is almost certainly folklore, the kind of story every lake town accumulates over time. But folklore lands differently once you understand that Tahoe is one of the rare places on the planet where the thing someone wanted permanently gone would not actually be gone at all. It would still be down there, intact, waiting in the cold and the dark for someone with a strong enough light and a steady enough hand to bring it back into view. What can be said with confidence is this. The SS Tahoe was a real ship, scuttled deliberately in 1940 and searched for unsuccessfully by multiple expeditions over the following decades. Chris Nicholson's team really did locate her using sonar and a remotely operated vehicle, and the preservation of that wreck really was remarkable, consistent with everything scientists know about Tahoe's cold, dark, low-oxygen depths. What cannot be verified, and what likely never will be, is the specific claim about what else the camera reportedly caught drifting at the edge of the frame before the recording stopped. That part exists only as an account passed from person to person, unattached to any surviving footage, any official statement, or any name willing to put itself on the record. Maybe that is exactly why the story has never faded. A fully documented discovery closes itself off once the facts are settled. A story with one missing piece, one section of tape nobody has ever produced, stays open indefinitely, inviting each new person who hears it to decide for themselves what they believe happened in that final unrecorded minute. Lake Tahoe has spent nearly 2 centuries being described as impossibly beautiful and impossibly deep in the same breath. And perhaps that tension is the real subject here. Not a single unverified shape on a monitor, but the unsettling knowledge that a place this photographed, this visited, this thoroughly mapped along its shoreline, still holds a floor that almost nobody has actually seen. So consider the question honestly rather than rhetorically. If you had been sitting in that freezing control room in 1991, watching an intact steamship rise out of 5 decades of total darkness, and then watching something else drift into the frame that no one could quite explain, would you have kept the camera rolling to document it properly? Or would you have done exactly what that crew is said to have done, ordered it pulled back, cut the feed, and left whatever was resting beside the SS Tahoe precisely where the lake had been keeping it all along? Some people will tell you the deep parts of Tahoe hold nothing but old boats and scattered debris. Others will tell you a lake that preserves everything it swallows is still holding on to things nobody has found the courage to go back and look for. Either way, the SS Tahoe herself is still down there tonight, sitting upright in water just above freezing, exactly where she has been for over 80 years, and exactly where she will likely remain for a long time to come.